I know a lot of people are probably sick and tired of hearing VR is dead. What's wrong with VR? And it's all this conversation, and it's a huge topic right now this year, and actually for the last 12 months. And Beardo Benjo just made a video about it, saying VR is not dead. It is sick. It's about a 22-minute video, and he's a prominent VR YouTuber amongst a bunch of other YouTubers that I watch. And this isn't a video to hate on him, knock on him, or anything. This is just more of like an addition and a response, adding to some of the topics and points that he's mentioned, and some of my thoughts, and some of the things that I've been thinking about since his video. I did talk about this in a two-part video earlier this year, talking about the future of VR games and the state of VR hardware about 6-7 months ago. If you want to watch those, go ahead. But after watching his video, I really didn't want to make a video after him, but I let it resonate with me for a few days, and I figured, okay, why not? Let me give my 2 cents on the topic. And I read some of the comments, and a lot of people don't understand, right? Like, what he's saying isn't wrong. It's not that it's not true. It doesn't. I do feel like that sometimes, where the excitement for VR isn't where it used to be, right? 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, like, we were all super hyped and excited. There was this game after game, update after update, talk after talk. And we had the Quest 3. We were expecting something a little bit more. We all been waiting for the Deckard. We had the PSVR 2 up and flop. You're just wondering what the heck is going on. There's rumblings of other headsets. We were hoping, maybe that with the Apple Vision Pro, they would do something right and people will be more excited about VR, but they made it so expensive, but they're still developing different types of lower cost headsets. So there's a lot of rumblings right now. Shout out to Aaron Yeager. But it's what he's saying isn't wrong. That's my point. There are some things I do disagree with a little bit, but yeah, it does feel like VR is kind of meh right now. There's like moments where it's exciting. There's moments that isn't, which that's how everything is. And that's the gaming industry as a whole. And on top of that, the tech industry as a whole. So it's not just specifically VR. VR is affected by it because it is gaming based and tech based. So of course we're going to feel it. I mean, economically, everything is struggling right now, but specifically tech and gaming. And we're seeing it across every industry, every company. Xbox laying people off, and after buying all these studios and promising this, and just shutting games and studios that were doing well, right? They were making successful games. And Sony, no one really knows what Sony's doing anymore. Like, they were just chasing the live service route, and then they shut down all these games and they all flopped, and now they're kind of like hanging dry. Like, there's a couple first party single player games that are coming out here and there. Helldivers was a random one-off, right? They didn't even expect it to be that successful, right? And now they're left here with kind of a drought. They have Ghost of Yote coming out. They just had Death Stranding 2 coming out exclusive to them first. So it doesn't feel like, even as a whole, certain companies are themselves, right? Xbox is kind of a little bit different, but they're doing pretty well, right? Relatively. But that's kind of the story and the feeling across everything. That's the problem. Like, even like game PC hardware, it's all kind of the same. So that's my point. I don't want to drag on this too much, and the problem is, he did say something where he said, I don't think it's an issue of hardware. I kind of have to disagree on that. I think it plays a big part of it. And he said it's not everything, but it's part of it. I think it weighs a lot more than you think. So this is the reason why. Meta is really the only company right now pushing VR. And it's not a lot lately, right? Since the Quest 3, it's been kind of quiet and it's been kind of downhill. And seeing the decisions that they've made, shut down certain games, shut down certain studios, move people over. They're focused on AI a lot more and Ray-Ban glasses, right? That's where they're at. And Meta right now has been all over the place because of investors. And he said, all these investors, and they're drying up, the money's drying up with developers. That's the problem with these investors. Since in the last 10 years, gaming has grown like an insane amount. During the PS4 era, the early days when PC gaming was booming and streaming was getting big, and they saw all this money come out and all these streamer personalities come out and YouTube personalities in gaming, and they saw where all the money was, they started pumping in the money, right? Gaming was still doing well. Like, it wasn't like it was like, oh, we need help. It was doing well, but that extra money took it to new heights, and it was on a trajectory where they wanted to get in early, right? And these investors, a lot of them don't understand gaming. They don't understand VR. They don't understand the creativity of aspect of things. They just want what's the trend, what's going to make us the most amount of money, and we want this type of growth. We don't want this type of growth. We want this type of growth, right? We want 5, 7%, 10%. We don't want one incremental small 1%, half a percent here, which I understand, but you can't always grow that exponential every quarter, every year, and you have to think of the long haul sometimes, right? But these investors, they're just going in and out with money. I'm not saying all investors are like that, all of them, but I'm saying that's what's happening, right? People who don't understand, people who are put in charge of studios and companies that don't understand gaming. Like, look at Jim Ryan when he came into Sony. He was just pumping all this money into live service because that's what the trend was. He was a numbers guy, right? He moved up to CEO and he was Sony's numbers guy, but he wasn't like a gamer, right? He even admitted, he's like, I'm not a gamer. Like that wasn't his thing. And now all those games that he was pumping and pushing for the live service, most of them shut down or failed, right? And you're seeing the same thing happen in the VR industry where the money's drying up and Meta's slowly pulling back. They've started to slowly pull away from PC VR, when PC VR is a huge component of VR itself. And the reason why VR got to where it was today was because of PC VR. Like the Oculus headsets that were PC based, Valve, HTC, all of those headsets. PC VR is a huge component and it has a huge market. People downplay it a little bit, but it's not as small as people think, and it's not. They downplay its influence, and even it might have influenced it in the early days. It still pushes it today. Majority of the Quest users have a PC to play PC VR, right? Like a good amount of people only play standalone, but it's not as big as people think it is, right? They think it's only standalone. People only want standalone. I mean, sure, that is a component. We want that aspect. But if you won't ask a lot of people, they want both. They want access to both, right? Because, these mobile chips aren't as strong as they used to be. So they downplay PC VR, and there's a huge customer base there that they're just waiting and itching. And a lot of people don't buy into Meta because what Meta is. Meta's number one is confusing. No one really knows. One year, their AI company, that's their main focus. One time, their AR glasses. And in the beginning, yeah, we're going to push VR in early pandemic days, push VR for work from home and change the way enterprise is done and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden that just disappeared, right? Because that's what the investors were like, hey, we need something quicker. AI came in and that was the biggest, big buzzword right now. It still is. That's the problem. And, you saw what Sony did with the headset. And a lot of these companies, like, they just expect to release something and just expect it to grow on its own now. Like, Sony and Xbox and Nintendo became who they are today because of the amount of effort and how much they pushed things, right? They had their hiccups, they had their ups and downs. They're not perfect. Every single of those companies had a deep end. Like the Wii U, massively unsuccessful. The Xbox One X, massively unsuccessful. PlayStation has its ups and downs as well, right? I mean, PlayStation right now is kind of complacent, and I had this feeling when the PS5 generation started, they're going to get a little complacent, and they did. They rode the wave of the PS4 generation. Now it's kind of like, it's still growing, but it doesn't feel the same. Just like how Beardo was saying, VR feels sick, right? But it's not dead. And gaming isn't dead. Fun games they're not going to go extinct. It's just in a weird place right now. And the big problem is Meta's the main company pushing VR, right? We're all waiting for the Deckard. Sony had a chance and they just dropped it. I don't know why. They just expected it to just do its own thing and without any effort. There were so many IPs that could have had a VR, component or a VR game spin-off, right? But they didn't really do much with it. And then, all these developers are expecting, okay, we have to develop for Meta only, right? Because and then PCVR, second thought, PSVR 2, maybe if it makes sense. We're seeing games pull back their DLCs, pull back support, not releasing on PSVR 2. You see where I'm getting at, right? You can't just rely on a company like Meta that's the main push for VR, but they're not really pushing VR as they used to do anymore. That's not their main focus. That's not what the investors woke up today and feel like doing today. It's just based off what they feel and what the trends are pushing and all these numbers and reports and blah, 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 all these suits what they want. And not to put blame on not to take away blame from developers either. Sometimes they'll just release a game to us that's half effort, right? They'll market it a certain way, and it's not that way. And I feel for them because also it does take funding, it does take effort, but it just needs a group of people to really push it. It needs a company, it needs a developer to really push it. And we still have those games that come out here and there. Hey, that was a good VR game. It's not perfect, but it was a good VR game. It's not saying there's nothing good coming out. It's just it's not it's not like one after the other after the other. It's everything right now is kind of slowing back. And every time when you have a dip, there's always a uptick. When that uptick is, how it's going to look like, we don't know. But what I would expect to happen, right? You need another VR headset from outside of Meta to add some competition. And the closest thing that we have, right, is the Deckard. PSVR 2 was that headset, but it wasn't. Pimax, you can't really count for that. Pico, same thing as a Quest, but most of the US can't have access to it. So the next thing you have is the Deckard. And Valve has been a part of two influential headsets that pushed VR to new heights. The HTC Vive and then the Valve Index. And they've released one game that till this day is to be dethroned, still to be dethroned as one of the best VR games ever made from 5-6 years ago. So it still holds that, and the amount of mods for it, and people still talk about it and still reference it and still go back to play it. That's what I'm talking about. This is the type of influence you need. Now, I don't think Valve's the only one capable of doing it, but the only ones that have done it are the closest ones that we know they're going to release another headset. And Valve has always been more consumer friendly than Meta, right? And Meta, there's been some issues. You heard some talks earlier this year about some of the things that they had issues with developers. Developers had issues with them. It's not ideal. People sometimes only turn to Meta because that's the only thing they have. I'm not trying to crap on Meta. Meta's done a lot for VR. They've released the Quest 2 and the Quest 3. It's just right now their decisions are kind of just like, okay, questionable, and their attention is elsewhere, right? Without Meta and the Quest 2 and 3, VR wouldn't be where it is today, right? All these extra indie games and new developers and people pushing things, and you have to give them credit. But there's a lot of questionable things that they do. Like, I have to be fair, right? You have to be fair. They do good and they do bad. And you have people like Boz say stuff like sometimes they just don't talk. So that's kind of my thoughts and the support to Beardo. I know he got a lot of hate on X and some of the YouTube comments because people don't understand, right? I'm just adding on to what he said, adding some extra points, and disagreeing on some things, not too much, but yeah, it does feel like that, man. It does feel like VR is in a weird spot, but it'll get better. We do have games. He did mention too, there are games coming out. It's not like there isn't anything, but it's not what it used to be, and I'm hopeful, right? I'm hopeful that there will be an uptick pretty soon, and hopefully it comes from Gabe Newell himself with the Deckard, and I'm excited for it in the future of VR. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about this conversation, what Beardo said, what I said, or anyone that's said anything about it at all, or what your thoughts are. Right? Let me know in the comments below what you think. Yeah, just have at it, guys. Be respectful and peace.